Okay, what's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. So, today I wanted to do another Super Sentai problems video. In this case, we'll be talking about a season other than Tensou Sentai Go-onger. In this case, it would be talking about Tokumei Sentai Go Busters. So, Go Busters, as many people know, was the season that came right after Go-onger, which is the season that Super Mega Force in America was based after, which Super Mega Force, if anyone's curious, is the season that happened right before our current season in America, which is Power Rangers Dino Charge. Super Mega Force was a season that was very much so disliked in a lot of ways due to the fact that things were not explained to the same extent that they should have been. The cameos weren't the best in the special where they featured that. The cameos weren't always done super well. There wasn't enough background. The story wasn't always clear. There's a lot of issues for Super Mega Force. But again, we're not talking about Mega Force in this case. We're talking about Super Sentai, and we're talking about Go Busters. So, Go Busters, as many people know, got skipped over. America jumped right from Super Mega Force, which was based off of Go-onger, all the way to Dino Charge, which is based off of Go-onger. So that season in between, that's Go Busters. That's what they skipped over. So you may be wondering why that was, and why in general is Go Busters not a good season? Because as you can tell right away, if that's true, that's a big deal. Why did they skip over the season? Well, I'm going to answer both questions. And the answer to that is, I am like have stuff in my mouth. So the answer to that is that Go Busters was a season that, first of all, it had a look that was very different, very unusual for Sentai. First of all, if you put the Go Busters next to pretty much any other season, they stand out too much. They look very unusual. They don't really look like Sentai members. Like typically, the colors really represent well because they all have very similar looks. There's typical spandex or whatever. In this case, the outfits were beyond different. Like, when you think of Sentai, this didn't look like Sentai. The outfits were very different. They had buddy roids, I believe that was right. Which were like figures that could speak to you or whatever. And you may think to yourself, that's sort of like Go-onger, but the thing is that Go-onger, it looked like a Sentai season. This show didn't have that same feel. The helmets were very different, like beyond different. I want to say that, like for example, they had for the visors or whatever for their eyes, there was actual like embedded like eyeball kind of symbols or whatever, basically to represent the eyes. Usually that's not a common thing. Usually it's based off of an animal or something else like that, and usually there's not eyes made into it. It's more like it's just kind of inferred based off of how the whole entire facial structure of the helmet looks. In this case, that element was changed. The outfits were kind of more leather-based, I guess you could call it. Didn't really look as much like there was as much spandex. The weapons were a little bit more unusual. Had a very different feel. There was definitely, there was Megazord and all that, and definitely an interesting thing. And they definitely could have done a Megazord. But the problem with it is the fact that it wasn't a season that really fit in too well. The other reason why there was no American season was also because the toy sales were atrocious in Japan. Really, I mean, they were not good by any means at all. And people really weren't that big of a fan. Like personally, for me, that was a show that I watched like half of it, and I've watched like the rest of it over time. But it took me a while to really get into it, and even then, like I wasn't really invested in it. I thought it was okay at times. The characters weren't all that interesting. The humor was very unusual, not the best at all. Definitely didn't feel like a season that you could easily get into. I mean, the theme was good. I'll tell you that much right now. The theme was one of the few things that I will say was at least good, but otherwise, it was okay at times. But more or less, so it was not a good season. There was a lot of things that they could have done differently. They definitely did something that what do you call it? Go-onger didn't do, which they should have done, which is the fact that they definitely emphasized their theme for the season. That at least was good. That I at least appreciate. But I feel at the same time they didn't. Certain elements of it made it feel very like so different that it didn't feel like your typical season. And it's not that it has to be a typical season, but if it doesn't have certain elements that make you feel like, oh, this is a Sentai season, and it feels like a good, and it has a good feeling to it, it's not going to go over too well over as a whole, and it's going to look weird. And to be honest with you, the mechs also, he looked kind of unusual, a little too realistic in certain cases, and a little bit too goofy in some cases, and well, just in general, it didn't work out to the way it did, obviously, and there were fewer characters in this case. There was only like 5 Rangers. The colors were a little bit more unusual. There was the main 3, but then there was gold and silver, which is kind of different, as many people know. So 2 special Rangers, similar to some of the older seasons that had happened prior, but which was definitely a change up for that reason. And the special, when they featured the previous one, that special was okay, but really, I was looking more at Go-onger than anything else in that, other than the Japanese or whatever, other than like Kamen Rider when they made their appearance, although I might think of 2 different things, but whatever. Still, kind of different. I kind of liked it, but just in general, I think that it was a season that looked so unusual, looked beyond different, that kind of turned a lot of people away from that season and led fewer people to buy into the merchandise and really kind of wait until a later season would come out, which would be Go-onger, which did super well. So, yeah. So anyway, that's about it for me with Super Sentai. For a discussion about the problems for Go Busters, tune in next time, probably, when I will be doing one for TheKingNappy, because I definitely want to talk about that, and we'll see from there. So anyway, guys, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.